Troglodyte warning. A poll came out earlier in the week saying that 52% of Gen Z in Britain want to be ruled by a dictator. But there's a key component missing in this discussion. So I want to talk about that. So let's get straight into it.
Half of Gen Z want Britain to be ruled by ... A dictator? Most young people are in favour of turning the UK into a dictatorship, according to a deeply worrying study that has revealed an acceptance of authoritarianism and radicalism among Generation Z. More than half, that's 52% of Gen Z, aged between 13 and 27, said they thought the UK would be a better place if a strong leader was in charge, and this is the most important bit of the whole thing, who does not have to bother with Parliament and elections. A third also suggested the UK would be better off if the army was in charge. Almost half, 47%, agreed that the entire way our society is organised must be radically changed through revolution, compared with a third of 45 to 65-year-olds. Something's gone very seriously wrong if they really...
Well, we have to be careful with these kind of polls. It was only 3,000 participants, and also the bias to the court, the type of people who kind of participate are more likely to be radical. And we live in very divisive times where people are prone to maybe answer in more hyperbolic ways and be extreme in their views. So we have to bear that in mind. This isn't necessarily indicative of the wider population of 68 million people in the UK. This doesn't necessarily indicate what it seems to indicate. And that's important to say, but it does indicate a very important and worrying trend.
think it's a good idea to replace democracy with a dictatorship, hasn't it? What's gone wrong?
Well, good afternoon, Vanessa. Yes, I mean, this came as a surprise to me. I'd like to reassure you and all your listeners that Generation Z, I'll call them Z if you don't mind.
I don't mind.
They have not lost their marbles. None of the young people we work with or we speak to, and that, and none of them want to be bullied. Not any of them have ever said one about. So we've got to look, and that's what dictators are, and they're just bullies, aren't they? So we've got to look behind the stat here and think, well, what is going on in this? So I don't know how the questions are framed and that, but maybe the young people do want a sense of safety and clarity, and maybe there's something we're not quite providing for them at the moment.
What kind of clarity do they want, though? What is it that they're feeling so unsure of that they would like a dictator to confirm, do you think? What are they lacking in terms of clarity and or safety?
Well, a lot of young people are missing a lot. High tuition fees, never being able to afford a home. What's the future look like? Climate change, automation. There's so much insecurity in the world, so much division, polarisation. So, yes, young people have real concerns. And much of what they're going through is, and this is what people aren't talking about, is distrust in institutions, massive mental health issues, which comes from economic inequality. We don't trust people anymore. We don't talk to people. Communities are dead. And this is because of that disparity between wealth. And we don't talk about it enough, how inequality just seeps into every social ill, from teenage pregnancy, alcohol addiction, gambling, obesity, mortality rates. So many indicators: distrust in institutions, mental health issues, suicide. The list goes on. So many social ills can be brought back to countries that have massive inequality, economic inequality, high incarceration rates. Look at America, the UK, some of the highest incarceration rates in the world. So much of what pushes people towards strong men and dictatorships is massive. Again, we saw it in the 1930s Germany after the Treaty of Versailles, 29 crash, massive poverty and inequality. And that gap between where you have people at the bottom who have status anxiety, the desire for stuff. We're being told, constantly bombarded with advertisements and want this. And poorer, more inequality, more unequal societies, have more spending on advertising. So a country like Denmark, for example, has very low advertising, but the UK has massive advertising because they know they're tapping into that discontent, status, anxiety at the bottom, and that kind of desire to be at the top, which breeds so much discontent, insecurity, self loathing. A lot of men, particularly, die by suicide because of money issues, and they internalize that self hate, the self loathing. And there's even studies to suggest that there's a correlation between inequality and domestic violence because men will internalize shame. They're not a provider, they're in massive debt, they don't feel like this image of a man, and they will explode that kind of insecurity and self hate onto other people. And who is it? The woman, potentially the children. So we need to look at the underlying issues of why young people feel what they feel. And so much of our discontent comes from economic inequality. And they don't talk about it in this interview, which I think says a lot.
Well, if you look at how you grow up, like as a very young child, you're just a bit of a sponge, really, and you just accept what your mum tells you and your dad tells you and your parents and things. But then when you get to them teenage years,
Mm.
you start getting a little bit more unsure, and these young people more than ever have issues to deal with, like on social media and that. They're looking for someone to give them some. If you were in a burning building, and someone went up to you and said, "I'm really confident. I know the way out. I can get you out of this building. Follow me." Then you're probably going to follow them. And that's what we're seeing in people like, Andrew Tate and dictators. And I'd also at some level say like the likes of Alan Sugar and Gordon Ramsay, these television characters
Alan
or social
Sugar and
media.
Gordon Ramsay spoke.
I think there's an element of truth to that, but it's also energizing and getting people excited and know that you're not politically correct and having humor and having, a bit of edginess, which the left doesn't have. The left, well, I think they do, but there's a perception that the left are all fuddy-duddies, they're too sensitive about certain words, and there's an element of truth to that. But we need to get people excited, and people, like Bernie Sanders did that. He got people excited, he got people on his side, he's likable, he's straight talking, you know what he believes in, and that's what we need. And the right are very good at that. They've got these characters like Andrew Tate, Donald Trump, who are just crazy, kind of exaggerated characters. And we need more of that on the left, but it's very difficult because that inherently lends to controversy and divisiveness, and it's a difficult thing to deal with.
Spoken about in the same terms as Andrew Tate and dictators. I think they have issue to take issue with you and be extremely indignant about that. Why have you put them in the same category, for goodness sake?
I just think they offer a form of masculinity. I mean, when we're talking about dictators, we're usually talking about men, aren't we? And we're offering, this like 100% self-assuredness and that, and life's often a grey area, isn't it? Where we have to.
Yeah, and a lot of Donald Trump, Elon Musk, these Jordan Peterson types, they're masking such a deep insecurity. You can see if you look beneath the surface of this kind of being strong. Like Hitler didn't want to be seen playing football or doing anything where he would look vulnerable. But we know that vulnerability actually exudes strength, and actually being vulnerable and being wrong and incorrect. Donald Trump has never been, he's never backtracked on anything. He will just say, "Oh, I didn't say that. Oh, no, I didn't." Complete lies, but being strong. People do like a strong leader, and to have that confidence to just say anything, and people just kind of go, "Well, he's confident in what he's saying. Maybe he's right."
To pick our way through it. And at the
Yeah, but
moment,
Gordon Ramsay's telling you
aren't
how to
getting.
cook a lamb chop. He's not telling you what to do with your life, and that you may not leave the house after 7 o'clock at night, and that you may not access various things because of who you are. He's just saying, to use a white tablecloth and make sure you give the crepe Suzette a good turnover, isn't he? I mean, I don't
Yeah.
think he
Well,
qualifies.
it's his manner. It's his manner which I'm referring to. I don't want to get sorry, Gordon, if you're
Yeah,
listening.
say sorry to
Apologies for that,
Gordon and Alan Sugar. It's not Alan Sugar's fault, is
Hi,
it?
Alan. Sorry, Alan. But my point is that in young people's lives, they need adults who can help them pick through and form their beliefs and values and their actions. And if we don't provide them with that, and parents have a multiple role, don't they? Schools have a role helping young people to develop their skills and knowledge. But where are young people getting the opportunity to develop their character right now? We've lost 75% of youth services. And for me, that's the third leg of the stool, to education, yeah, parents, yeah, but also what happens, where do young
That's a massive one, actually. Since COVID and the increase of inequality again, younger people are more anxious. They're distrusting of people and they don't want to go out. So they are more likely to stay in where they don't form those relationships. They don't push themselves. They don't create communities and they become radicalized online because they're exposed to YouTube and Facebook, which we know studies are more likely to push right wing content because it's more sensationalist, more divisive, it gets more clicks, it's more kind of like controversial. You can be more edgy and go against the politically correct elite. And this is the environment we've created where young people just don't go out anymore as much as when I was young. Like I was out for the first 20 years of my life, I was outside. Young people aren't anymore.
people get the opportunity to debate and to look at question stuff on the internet, that critical thinking is essential as we go forward now. People are going to have more access to more information.
But that's the thing. This is difficult because the right, figures like Jordan Peterson, Elon Musk, Donald Trump, they reject like the universities and critical thinking and experts. So how do you engage in critical thinking, which is a set of questions about your own assumptions, why you believe things, and the evidence that correlates to your beliefs? Well, people reject that ideology. People reject it, and that's what fascism is: the rejection of of intellectuals, the elites, and certain institutions that tell you, "Oh, this is the science." It's very anti-intellectual.
You're going to get people who are really confidently telling them, can we help young people to be critical thinkers, please? Can we do that with youth work and youth services? I know Lisa Nandy's called for a review of that, and I think it's absolutely essential, Vanessa.
Well, when you say
But again, it's that underlying distrust of institutions. There's a reason why they're rejecting democracy, rejecting feminism, rejecting liberal values, you could argue. And it is a failure of liberalism to provide the resources and basic needs in a way, like housing, education, healthcare, hope for the future. This is almost like Maslow's hierarchy of needs. People aren't having their needs met. So if they're not having their needs met, they historically they do turn to a strong leader. We see this across the world. We see it across time.
how do we help when we need to help young people to be critical thinkers? What does that mean? I thought that was exactly what happens when, for example, in the old days, you take your history O level, or these days your GCSE in history. That's when you look at what regimes have done or what dictators or politicians have passed, and you discuss in class and you write your essay for homework, and then you do it again in the exam at the end of the year. Whether it was a good idea, whether it was a bad idea, which of the philosophies that have failed, which of the empires that crashed, which of the ones that flourished, whether anything flourishes permanently, all that sort of thing. That's critical thinking, isn't it? Aren't you meant to do that at school, partly? And then, of course, when you get home, and of course, you're not looking at your phone, you're sitting there with your two charming and articulate parents, which most people don't have, around the kitchen table or dining room table, which most people no longer have, having a conversation, which most people no longer have, about whatever it was you learned at school, so that you can develop an ability to have some kind of analytical thinking. I mean, isn't that supposed to be partly provided at school and partly at home?
Definitely, and some people do that really excellently. But there's the people who do that are our secret weapon in this country are youth workers who are out there every day being kind in society, helping young people to pick through moral dilemmas that they are facing, and doing it without polluting them with their own views and own agendas. Where young people are getting a lot of influence from now is the internet, and people go on the internet not to do critical thinking, not to ask questions, but to put views across. And this is why they're saying, "All right, this person seems so confident."
And I've heard people on the right saying echo chambers are a good thing, that people need to keep their own little group. No, that's what the online world does. It creates a mirror world of alternative facts, of bespoke reality, of you can have your own beliefs and it doesn't need to be embedded in evidence or science. It's like it can be enabled by your probably worst instincts. And that's what a lot of the right does. They kind of enable some of the worst instincts of humanity, like a reactionary feeling like, oh, those people are the problem. If there's lots of societal problems, but if we just kind of just got rid of those people, everything would be fine. And then on the right, they're denying that. It's like, oh no, we don't believe that. But these views never end well. These views historically do not end well.
Confidence. I'd like to emulate them. I'd like a really confident person running the country who doesn't have to bother with parliament. But actually, there's a real value in seeking other people's opinions and asking questions. I mean, like the one I put to you then, honesty and loyalty. Loyalty can often get young people into a lot of trouble, you know? And it's like youth workers are out there talking to them and getting them to pick through these things, which can really help them. But unfortunately, we've lost 75% of our youth workers over the last 10 years. You can't take that out of society and not feel the pain.
Very good point. Adam, hello. Thanks so much.
Yeah, and that's a key point. Austerity has increased economic inequality. It's decreased trust in institutions. And now we are at a point where people are questioning the validity of democracy. So if you want to challenge this right wing narrative, hit the like button and I'll see you next time.